Welcome to Regis World Literature. This is lesson 28 on grammar. Now, our goal has been to really have a thorough study and understanding of the many ways that commas are used in a sentence. And I want to take this lesson to review what we've learned so far. Now, we're not finished yet with commas, so there's so much you need to learn about commas. I want to go over the categories, and I want you to know the categories. I would want you to be able to outline this and give an example for every one. So let's just pretend that this were a test, even though we're only about halfway, a little bit over halfway through our commas. If I were to say to you, outline the number of ways a comma is used, I would want you to write this. Now, because we are going to be out the rest of the year, as perhaps you've already heard from the governor, we are going to be very, very deliberate, and we are required as well, because we're a support system to the homeschool family. We're not necessarily required, but because we do provide you report cards, we are going to be very clear in what we're going to ask of you to complete in order to get a grade from us. Okay, so because of all that, in light of that, thinking that through, I want to be crystal clear on what I am requiring of you on the test. You will have a test on grammar, on the grammar of the comma. Okay, and I'm going to tell you exactly what it's going to be composed of. First, I'll want you to outline. Now, we'll probably, before the end of the year, have part 1 and part 2, okay, on commas. So this is part 1. I'll want you to be able to outline these reasons for using a comma. I've gone over each one of these in the last several tapes, so you can go back and watch them all again and get the details. So I'll want you to be able to make this outline just like we're doing it. Look at parenthetical information. I've added a thought right here. Additional information or side commas, because we're going to also, I haven't finished all the rules, and we're going to have more rules regarding parenthetical information. Okay, so I'm separating out the ones that add information. Okay, the first 3 are adding additional information to the sentence. The last 2 are making side comments. As either a side comment like an interjection. My, what a pretty dress. My would be the interjection. Or Mary, how did you like the lecture? Mary, is the person I'm talking to, would be the noun of direct address. Now, for each of these, you want to just be able to, you want to be able to create that outline. That's number 1. Number 2 is you want to be able to give an example for each, properly punctuated. So I'm telling you what to practice and what to know. In writing, properly punctuated. So essentially, I'm telling you the test, okay? So that would be number 2. How do I know that? Well, go back to the other tapes. Listen to them again if your notes haven't been clear enough, and get yourself a good example for each. Make sure you understand what we're talking about. In other words, if I say, give me an example of a sentence with an absolute phrase that requires a comma, then you need to be able to write me an example, all right? So you need to understand this vocabulary over here on the left-hand side. The third, now I won't have you just straight down the board writing examples, I'll say, give me an example of a sentence using commas and having direct address, okay? Or give me an example of a sentence that joins coordinate adjectives. The other thing I want you to do is give me an example of an exception when it's required, when it exists. Not all of these have an exception, but certain ones do, right? In other words, let's see. You have an option in the items on the list, right? On whether or not you use an extra comma or not. That Oxford comma. So that might be considered an exception. I could ask you a specific question like, give me 2 ways to write a sentence with a list of 3 nouns, or a list of 3 verbs, or a list of 3 verb phrases, something like that. Okay? Coordinate adjectives, a list of adjectives. Now this is kind of tricky because there's no exception for how we do coordinate adjectives, but they're as opposed to cumulative, right? So this would be what I'm talking about an exception. I could have coordinate adjectives like he wore a long blue jacket, or I could have cumulative adjectives like he wore a red soccer jacket or something like that, where a soccer jacket's a specific type of jacket. One would have commas and one would not. So that would be an example of something to watch for with an exception. This is not an exception, so I'll put this in another color, but I might tell you to write an example with an introductory comment, like, if you would please all sit down, the lecture will begin immediately. If you would please all sit down would be an introductory comment. Okay, something like that. Parenthetical information, absolute phrases. Now, the only thing that you want to know here, like I might say, write me a sentence that uses commas with an absolute phrase in the middle of the sentence. So I could talk about location. We have the beginning. For many of these things, they could be put, like this parenthetical information, could be placed at the beginning, in which case the comma will follow, in the middle, in which case the commas will surround, or at the end, in which case the comma will precede. That's probably fairly obvious, but notice position, okay? Let's see, what else might I ask you? Of course, you need to know, there's no exceptions to interjections or nouns of direct address, there's just location. Relative clauses can have an exception if I have a restrictive relative clause. So go back and review that idea on a previous tape if you need to, if you haven't taken good notes to understand it already. Appositives could have an exception if we have restrictive appositives. So these introductory or closing comments don't really have exceptions. Let me take that arrow out. But the coordinate adjectives definitely have an exception. Okay? So those would be our exceptions. The others would be based on location. That's not really an exception. Okay. So essentially what have I said to you? that for this part of the test, this would be test on commas, test 1 on commas. It's coming up. Okay. I'll put it as an attachment and send it in an email. Okay, test 1 on commas. You want to be able to outline this outline just as you see it on the left-hand side. That's part 1. Part 2, you want to give an example for each, and I'll specify the example so you won't just run down the list. I'll say, like I was illustrating, give an example with 2 coordinate adjectives, and give an example, I might say, give an example with 2 cumulative adjectives. Or I might say, give an example of 2 coordinate adjectives and give me 2 adjectives before a noun that is an exception to this rule. Okay, or illustrates the exception. Okay, because remember what we're really trying for is practical information on how to use this with your writing. Okay, so I think rather than going on to new ideas, I wanted to just expand that for you and would recommend you spend the rest of this kind of focused time that you're learning grammar to correct any work that has been handed back that has grammar errors on it, and seeking with a good grammar book to understand the errors, or to go back and review some of these previous tapes to make sure that you know all this information. So 1, 2, 3 sections, right? All right. Now, few more comments here I'd like to give you here is that, actually, let me pause on that and not do that yet, sorry. Okay, go ahead and do exactly what I've told you to. If I have some further instructions, I'll give them on the next tape as we're thinking through exactly how our requirements are going to shift, since we won't have school until the rest of the year is out. So, but you keeping up on your work? Of course, we will collect your notes. We'll collect the unit, right? And for completion, grading that for completion, as well as having these tests that will constitute your grade. All right, I think that's all that I need to say. As always, feel free to text me with any questions. I could understand that some of you might have questions at this point. If you are at all confused about what's expected of you, text me, and I will clarify. This is very important that you keep up. 505-301-1357 with any questions. You will receive, in the next couple of days, you will receive this test in your email. And you must finish it up, and we'll be instructing all families as to how to get papers back and forth now that we will be closed till the end of the year. Okay, keep the faith. I'm sure you are. Just if you at all feel troubled in your spirits or apprehensive about the days in which we live, I would recommend 2 things. Immerse yourself in Scripture, because the Lord would desire that we not fear, but cast all our care and all our anxiety upon Him, because He cares for us. That would be one exhortation. 2, I would exhort you to spend time in worship, cultivate a spirit of gratitude, recognize all that you do have and all the ways God's taken care of you, your family, and your friends. Okay. And 3, I would exhort you to pray. Pray with intercession for the nation, for the world, for this time of crisis. May the Lord have mercy, have compassion, hold His hand for us against this plague, but also let us learn what it is we need to take away from this. And I think one of those things is to have a spirit of humility and dependence upon him. So those would be my personal exhortations. You have a wonderful day. And again, if you have any questions about this or anything else and what you're supposed to be doing in this season, then you need to make sure that you contact me through a text, and I will get back to you. Okay? And so, you know, this can't be a vacation for you. Okay? I mean, it can be if your parents decide it will be, but you will lose the semester. You will have to make that up in the summer, some other way, in another program, through some other distance learning program, whatever you would choose, but you cannot count this semester as schooling towards your graduation if you are not doing the work. So please, please don't waste this time. God bless you.